So at the church I attend, I think like a lot of churches, right? It's like a yo-yo kind of thing, right? We were closed for a chunk of the pandemic, and then we were open back up again, with you had to wear a mask. And gladly. I just want to go back to church. I was happy to see everybody, to be in worship with my community. And then, we went through a period where like, okay, you can get rid of your masks, which is fabulous. I mean, there it is. Great. We're back to, in air quotes, normal. But then a few months after that, maybe just not even a few months, maybe 2 months, they were like, you know what? Things are kind of funky again. We're going to mandate masks. So, the weird thing is, you kind of go, initially, whenever we first went back, a tiny percentage of your friends were there, and then we started to build. The word got out. Hey, man, we're back again. And people started to get hungry, and they started to come back. And then we were wearing masks, and then we weren't wearing masks, and then we were wearing masks again. And then when we hit that area where we're going to wear masks again, I mean, a good friend of mine, she's fabulous, and she was like, I'm out of here because this is crazy. This is like fear, everyone's afraid. So I'm not coming back, or I'll come back whenever you're not going to wear a mask again. Well, I get that. I mean, I do. I get it, but at the same time.
Nobody likes wearing a mask.
No.
Which we've said 10,000 times in the last year and a half. Nobody likes wearing a mask.
And so I get that. I mean, people are upset about it. So.
But does that mean that we either withdraw completely?
No.
Or does that mean that we start to look at the people who are making those decisions as somehow like the enemy?
Right, because these people, I've been with these, people, my friends for a long, long time, and I love these guys, I do.
And what about the people who lead your church?
I love them too. And you know what? They're just trying to follow along and try to be good stewards to make sure that everyone's good. That's all. It's not, and I don't believe it's like some political thing or no one. But like all things in this era that we live in, it's become contentious, and it's made people angry and upset and finger pointing and, I'm not coming back, and you guys are a bunch of sheep. How can you be a sheep just going along with what, the church is saying? And, you're following the CDC guidelines. You're a bunch of, why would you even do that? We're not coming back to church ever again.
And so it becomes some kind of ideological standoff.
Where all of a sudden you want to be in community and worship and be with people that you know and love together like you've been together for years. And now all of a sudden there's like a hard line that's drawn where I'm showing up at church and I'm less than because I'm a sheep and I'm choosing to wear a mask like we've been asked to do. And those other guys, my buddies, are like pointing the finger like, calling names or whatever, and we're never coming back. And I love those guys, and I know that they love me.
Right. So when you look at situations like this, and that's a real life example in John's, social circle, we all can think of instances where we were on one side of that conversation or the other side of that conversation.
In society and
yes,
in the church.
Yeah, and in public.
Right.
And my question is this. Why are we always drawn in to thinking that people on the other side, people who disagree with us, are the enemy? That's my question.
The enemy. David French is with us. David's a senior editor at The Dispatch, which is a daily newsletter, I would say, that we love. It's in our mailbox every morning around 7 a.m. He's also an attorney practicing in constitutional law, a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and a New York Times bestselling author. Hey, David, you walked in the middle of this conversation about contentiousness.
I did. And my goodness, what an important conversation. This is, I keep going back to a conversation that I had with a collection of really prominent and thoughtful pastors more than a decade ago. I mean, about 15 years ago. I'll never forget it. We were in a conference room in New York talking about cultural developments in American Christianity. And one of them said this: I've noticed a profound change. He said, it used to be that, especially amongst younger Christians, we could disagree about important things and remain friends. I'm noticing increasingly that agreement is a prerequisite to friendship. And I thought, I've not forgotten that. And I have noticed that more and more and more and more, that agreement is a prerequisite for friendship. And what ends up happening, there are two things that happen when that's the case. One is, it's actually an expression of a lot of arrogance to sort of hold that view, because it says that we, as very limited human beings who have limited knowledge about a whole host of topics, are in a position to say that we're so correct that it is not worth a close relationship with people who are incorrect.
Right.
And then the other thing that it does is a practical matter is it just contradicts the example of Jesus. It's interesting when you think about Jesus and his disciples. He spent his entire ministry with people who not only didn't understand his ministry fully,
Right.
but he knew that in the ultimate moment, we're going to be, by and large, nowhere to be found. And one of them was actually going to betray him, and another one, Peter, was actually going to abandon him in his hour of ultimate need. And yet he not only hung in relationship with those people, he died for them. He died for them. And so there's a couple of ways in which, it's both it's that arrogance that says, I know enough to know that you are not worth a relationship if you disagree with me. And also this sort of contradiction of the biblical example of Jesus and the cross that's just so damaging about the Christian, the atmosphere in parts of the church today.
David, you have written, I don't know, maybe you started writing a year and a half ago, maybe longer ago, about negative partisanship. And negative partisanship, I'll throw out a definition of it. I think that, when I think of the term, I think that if I'm in one camp, I look at the other camp and all I can think of are all of the things that they don't like about me. And that's what that camp is like. And they hate me and they hate everything I stand for. And that's why I hate them. And your research, David, has shown that the actuality, the reality of that isn't what we assume. Can you talk about it a bit?
Yeah. What's really fascinating is that at large scale, we're actually wrong about our political opponents. That the average Republican believes the average Democrat is much more extreme than he or she really is. And then here's what's especially interesting. The more engaged a person is with politics and political media, the more wrong they are about their political opponents.
Oh, that's good.
That's so great.
They think their opponents are more extremist than they really are. They think their opponents hate them more than they really do. And so you have a lot of people running around on, Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, who are, well, I've done my research and this is what the Democrats are like. And what their research is actually doing is deceiving them. Mm-hmm. It's deceiving them. And the people who are most right about their political opponents are the people who get their ideas about their opponents from these, really antiquated things called friendships. They're the ones who are most right.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to the original topic, or the original kind of like petri dish we were looking at, which was, John's group of friends at his church. We can do that. It doesn't have to be political parties. Negative partisanship can happen with people who disagree about masking at Sunday worship.
Oh, and in fact, it's happening at scale across the country. And, look, I have friends who oppose masking, and I have friends who support masking. I have friends who are Democrats. I have friends who are Republicans. One of my closest friends in the world is a guy that I served with in Iraq who is about as different from me as you can humanly be. I mean, I'm a white evangelical conservative. He is a Mexican-American, former Catholic, former Mormon, agnostic, progressive.
We spent, when I was in Iraq, really.
Oh yeah. He's a unique guy. We spent a lot of our deployment in Iraq. This was 2007, 2008, when I was supporting Mitt Romney in the primaries, and he was all about Barack Obama. when we redeployed home, I used some of my law school connections to get him great tickets to the Obama inaugural. And how does he repay me? He sends me a video from the inaugural of George W. Bush's helicopter leaving the White House while he sings the goodbye song.
Love you.
Oh, that's harsh.
And he's flying from Germany to my house tomorrow for us to get together with other friends from Iraq for a reunion. We haven't seen each other in 2 years. And these guys we're all over the place politically. And these guys are close to me as brothers. And we're losing that. And what it requires to do that, what it requires to have those relationships is it requires grace and actual tolerance. We've kind of messed up what the definition of tolerance is. It's sort of, we've reframed it as sort of affection, but tolerance actually means accepting people in spite of things that you might profoundly disagree with.
Yeah. So David,
and so we've lost that.
But there you are, David, and I would say that you're on the front lines probably more than most people on the cultural wars. But there's the church. I mean, if the church can't get it right, if you call yourself a believer in Jesus,
and we're fighting about masks on Sunday morning,
and you're holding a grudge against somebody that you know and you love, and you've been together and you've worshiped together, something is deeply misconstrued with our society.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm not arguing that people should remain in relationships with people who are actively trying to harm them.
Yes.
Because I have seen that there are people they get so angry, they will actually try to harm you emotionally, at extremes, physically, that actually happens in this world, but they actually try to harm you emotionally. They actually try to undermine you, actually try to destroy you, break you down. In those circumstances, sometimes you just have to say, I love you, but I cannot be present in your life. And so I'm not saying that, we have to, no matter what happens, maintain friendships. But what I am saying is that, I was at another meeting of pastors. I tend to be at a lot of meetings of pastors, even though I'm not a pastor. And we were talking about how do we interact? What's our strategy for approaching the world? What's the strategy that we have right now? And people were talking about this approach politically, this approach culturally, a lot of really interesting and good ideas. And this pastor said, have we tried the fruits of the Spirit? It's like,
what?
Well, when you say it like that, that sounds kind of obvious.
Yeah.
But, you can, if you think about it, you can tolerate a lot of disagreement if your relationship is characterized by kindness, patience, self-control, all of these virtues. You can tolerate a lot of differences. It's when the fruits of the Spirit fall away, when instead of kindness, it's cruelty, when self-control, it's angry impulsiveness, when it's gentle, instead of gentleness, it's harshness. That's when these things start to degrade. It's not necessarily the underlying substantive disagreement. It's the manner of the disagreement that starts to crush us.
And listen, I think that going back to what we talked about at the start, David, I think a lot of it just has to do with our overwhelming belief in our own correctness. I really do. I think there's such a profound lack of humility. This is such a gigantic world, an enormous, uncountable cosmos that we're in. And we talk like we understand exactly 100% of what we're talking about all the time.
No, you're completely right. I mean, there's Scripture even directly rebukes that mindset. It says we know in part, we see through a glass darkly. So that mindset is directly rebuked. Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you, O man? What is good? Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. But here's the tricky thing. Sometimes we are exactly right. Sometimes we're right. And yet when somebody is actually wrong in our lives, we love them. The fruits of the Spirit don't become optional when we are right and somebody else is wrong. So it's sort of, both things at once. One, we're not as right as we think we are, which should give us humility. And the other one is, even when we're right, we are to love people and, bless those who persecute you. That's not saying because you deserve the persecution. I mean, you're deserving the persecution. You're still blessing those who persecute you. And when was that written? That was written when persecution was something really, really real in a way that we don't have in the United States, not anywhere close.
I'm into that. That's really well said, David. Thanks for being with us. Before you do leave us, though, talk to our audience about the Dispatch.
Listen, we
and what you're
love,
about.
David, what you guys are doing at this. Look how I just went. You asked David and I decided to answer.
Yeah.
It's
No, go
so
ahead.
good, though.
Go ahead, Kath.
It is so good. We read it every single day.
Love it.
It's just reasonable. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's good reporting and it's expressed reasonably.
Well, that's the Dispatch, y'all. That's I appreciate that very much, but that was our entire goal when we started. We saw a media landscape that we thought was full of hyperbole and exaggeration and intentionally provocative. And so we, rather than condemn that media environment, we thought we'd try to build something better. And so we've built a news organization that is centered around fact-based reporting, analysis, and commentary. And that doesn't mean we're perfect, but it means we try really hard to cut through the partisan fog and figure out what's really going on.
I'm into that.
Well, great
Reporting,
job to you and
analysis,
everybody else
commentary.
there. Congratulations on your 2-year anniversary.